Ossie, what beside our name, or all that we may own, do we bequeath our children? What stories do we tell them? What poems or family fairy tales do we give them directly from our hand or by the telling?
How will they know their worth, or ours? The mighty sweep of human history into which they were born, except we share with them all that time has left on deposit with us.
Stories of aspiration.
Stories of achievement.
Stories of hope and love.
Stories of disappointment. These stories, which we tell you now, these hands upon the heart trap the meaning of our meaning,
leaving their print forever upon the soul.
Stories have the last word.
They sum us up,
letting us into the landscape of the imagination, where nothing good
and true
and beautiful will ever die.
We tell you now a story of the earth. God called a man to the tilling of the land, but left him at the end of his days at a place where a road on that land that was his life divides forever.
Yesterday, I walked the land again, and every step I took, I thought of you. Alexander, my grandson. All the way up to the railroad, all the way down to the river, walking, talking, thinking about you. And Cato and Riley, your great-great-grandfather, and how more than 100 years ago they come down into this country with one mule, one axe, one army rifle, and one old dog. And they took this land, and they built this place, and they called it Fussel's Landing. Nadine, God rest her soul. Nadine, she thought of Fussel's Landing as something holy, like it says in the Bible. And it shall be unto you an inheritance to have, to hold, to pass on down to your children and your children's children.
Not so loud, Amos. Not so loud. You woke the baby.
Nadine, for goodness sakes, what you doing up out that bed?
I'm fine, Amos. I'm fine.
Let me put this shawl around
Here,
your
Amos.
shoulder.
Here, Amos, you hold him. Go on, Amos. Take him. He ain't gonna break. Take your son. Doc, this here's your daddy. Now, you be a good boy and mind everything he tells you. You hear me? Well, I reckon I'll go on back upstairs and lay back down.
Well, I thought maybe you and Clyde was going to visit with me for a spell out here.
Clyde can stay. That's why I brought him out here, so you and him can get acquainted. Two of you gonna need one another after I'm gone.
when you're gone.
I'm
Nadine.
perfectly all right. I've never been so happy in all my life. Just tired, that's all.
Boy, the first thing I want you to know is you got one of the finest, sweetest, prettiest women in the world for your mama. You hear me, Clyde? You hear me?
I made a deal with the Lord, did I tell you that? And he done kept his part of the bargain.
A deal?
My life for the life of a son for my husband. I told the Lord, let this child live. Let him grow up and carry on his daddy's name and his daddy's work. And let him love this land like his daddy and his daddy's daddy before him. Just let him live, Lord. And I'd be glad to give up my life in exchange.
Nadine, just a minute.
I don't mind. He done kept his part of the bargain, and I'm gonna keep mine. Only, Amos, promise me one thing.
Now
Let go
stop
of
it, Nadine. You just stop.
Oh.
No. Daddy didn't
Rock
mean
him, Amos.
to quit.
Rock him. Sing. I want you to get to know each other.
Go and tell Aunt Lucy. Go and tell Aunt Lucy.
Now tell him,
Go
Amos.
and
He's not too young. Tell him.
Clyde, this is Fussel's Landing, which the Lord thy God has given thee. Shall be an inheritance to thee, thy children, thy children's children, forever and eternal. Amen. I told it to Clyde, like Nadine said. He didn't listen. If he did, he didn't understand. He went on up north, got to be a big man in real estate or something. Too big for Fussel's Landing.
Get some gas and come back in about 30 minutes to pick me up. How you, Pa?
Where's Xander?
He's with Francine. She took him with her to tennis camp.
You promised next time you come you was gonna bring him to see his grandpa.
Well, Francine's got a father, too. Besides, he lives closer. Well, Pa, ain't you gonna invite me in?
Come on.
Place sure has changed.
No, it ain't. Well, Clyde, how are you?
Fine, Pa. Couldn't be better. Rising prices in the seller's market. Oh, I got a new business partner. Marvin Axelrod from Canada.
Axelrod. Sounds white.
He is, Pa. What difference does that make?
No?
We're meeting in Atlanta. Then we fly over to Zurich.
Over Zurich. Where's that? Africa?
No, Pa. Switzerland. Now, look, Switzerland's got all the money in the world, which you need in copious quantities if you intend to build condominiums.
Condominium.
Yeah, big, expensive, high-rise apartment buildings owned by somebody rich. We build them, Pa. Me and Axelrod. Hey, I didn't fly all the way from Detroit to talk about me, but about you, Pa. Tell me about you. What's happening at Fussel's Landing? What's the problem?
No problem. And you don't have to concern yourself with me or with Fussel's Landing. I told you that.
Oh, come on, Pa. You wouldn't have called me if it wasn't a problem.
It's your inheritance. It's your son's inheritance.
And you owe the bank $130,000. You're 18 months behind in your payments, and you're afraid they might foreclose, right?
Who told you that?
Charlie Strickland, over at the Farmers Bank. I called him. He told me there's not but 5 family farms left in Tayroe County. 5. And the only black farm left is you, Fussel's Landing. Now, what happened to all the other black farmers in the valley? Gone? What, Stovall, Benson, Collins, Mac McCullough?
What happened to him?
Gone. All up. All my friends and neighbors, everyone. Black Farmers Union, all gone. But I ain't.
Just like I said 20 years ago, right out there. Family farm is finished.
No, it ain't.
What? Oh. Why don't you come to Detroit, like we asked you? Me and Francine will find a place for you.
I've been to Detroit once, remember?
In spite of the last time, you still be welcome. What about your grandson? Now, don't you think you at least owe him something?
I owe him exactly what I owed you and tried to give you, Fussel's Landing. You won't even bring him down here and let me see him.
You know, I stopped by the cemetery on the way in. Sure keep it clean, Pa. I never knew Mother. Maybe if I did, it'd be different between me and you. Think so, Pa?
I don't know, Clyde. You never was no farmer, and sending you off to college just made it worse.
Yeah, so I remember. That was the first summer I was back from Tuskegee. Was it May or June?
We ain't talking about cutting hair or keeping books or selling life insurance, Clyde. We talking about farming.
And farming is a business. I mean, look, these pamphlets and books that I ordered from the government, they all say that farming is a business.
Is that what they've been teaching you all up in those colleges?
Family farms, places like Fussel's Land, and everybody else's, they're uneconomical. See, we gotta do like the big boys are doing, like those giants in agribusiness. Look, we join up, 5,000 acres. We go to the bank, borrow big money, just like the big boys do it. Now, that's the only way we're gonna make money.
Clyde, is that all that this means to you? A way to make money?
Oh, money's all right. Money's fine. There's a lot of things you can't get without it. But land, Clyde, that's the main thing.
Them big combines. I seen them in the magazine. That's machines, Clyde. That ain't men. Now, it may be business like you say it is, but it sure ain't farming.
Now, I don't mind a tractor, but them great big old things, all that mechanized stuff, it ain't no different than a factory or mine or a railroad train, if you ask me.
But that's how it's gonna be in the future. See, we gotta modernize and come together like the white farmers are doing now. Now, we gotta be as big and as strong and as efficient as they are. Otherwise, we're gonna be left behind.
No, we're not gonna be left behind. The government ain't gonna stand for something like that. Come on, Clyde. You've been away to college one
Look,
year.
what I'm saying is there's no money left in small farms like this. I'm trying to tell you.
What you're trying to tell me is you're talking foolishness. Now, go on inside. We got to get on with the rest of the meeting here. Go on. And Clyde, if you want to read something, you read your Bible. Yeah. The rest of these books is about to addle your brain. Now, go on back inside. Go on. Clyde wasn't satisfied, but it wasn't until that thing with Martin Luther King and the school board that it happened.
Not the county school board, Pa. Voter registration. What Dr. King wants is the black folks of Tayrona County to do like they did in Selma.
And you want me to sign this petition?
Yeah, Pa. You, Mac McCullough, everybody else. See, we Fussels got more influence than anybody in the valley. Now, what we do, we take up the lead to the courthouse, demand the right to vote, just like Dr. King said, and the rest will follow.
Now, Clyde, me and the rest of the farmers in the Black Farmers Union, we know about Dr. King. We love him, we admire him, we support him. Just 2 months ago, we sent him a big check. But we can't sign this petition. At least, not right now.
Wait a minute, why not? Pa, you're the president of the Black Farmers Union. They signed it if you signed it first. Why not?
I was just over to the Farmers Bank talking to old man Strickland about my loan so I can get my seed and get started. And he come right out and told me that any black farmer with his name on that petition would have his credit looked into mighty, mighty careful. And even if his application was approved, it would take so long to process it, probably wouldn't get his money till June. You know what that means.
Yeah, I know what it means, all right. It means you refuse to sign this voters' rights petition, something that most black folks would be willing to die for because you're afraid of the Farmers Bank.
What's that you say?
I said I was going to stop by the Farmers Bank on the way out and fix it with Charlie.
And tell Charlie that this ain't the first time I owed Farmers Bank money. And as soon as I sell my crop...
Sell it where, Pop? As high as the dollar is overseas, soybeans are uneconomical. They're too expensive, non-competitive. Same for wheat, same for corn.
And what about the government? What about price support?
That's over, Pa. Now, the administration has already decided that family farms like Fussell's Landing cost the government too much money. Price support is finished.
No, it ain't.
It is finished, Pa. And so are all the other family farms in the country. Why can't you see that?
The family farm is the foundation of the American way of life. It's what the country is, and the government knows it. Now, we got some fools in Washington, but none of them that big. The family farm is the bedrock of this nation, and the government ain't gonna never let them go down. Never, never.
All right, Pa. All right. All right, Pa. Promise Francine I would not get in an argument with you. That's exactly what I did. I already talked to Charlie Strickland. I sent him a check before I came. It's already taken care of.
You did?
Yeah. Anything for my old man.
I'm so glad you see it. Fussell's Landing. It's our inheritance. Yours. Mine. Xander's.
I told him that. Told him that the other night. Yeah. I tried to tell him about Cato and Riley. I can't tell it like you though, Bob. That's my car. Look. But I did tell him that someday Fussell's Landing is going to belong to him. Take care, Bob.
Well, we're still here, me in this old place, trying to hang on. Every day, it gets harder. And Fussell's Landing ain't been doing so well at all. Up to now, of course, I could always depend on Clyde to step in and bail me out, just like he'd been doing for the last 7 years. But last week, Charlie from over the Farmers Bank sent word that he wanted to see me.
Charlie, you sent for me?
Yes, Amos, yes. Amos, this is Mr. Klaus Snitchler from Germany.
How do you do?
Klaus represents the new owners.
New owners of what?
The Farmers Bank. It'll still have the same name, of course, at least for a while. But us Stricklands won't own it anymore. German Bank has gone and bought us out.
I'm sorry to hear that, Charlie. Knowing what this means to you and old man Strickland.
Well, I was just telling Klaus here about Fussell's Landing. He wants to come out on Friday and look it over.
Look it over for what?
Well, it's right on the river for one thing. As a matter of fact, it's deep there. Deep enough. If you dredged it, open it up, ships Flatboats, maybe even barges could pull right up to the shore and offload cargo.
Excuse me, Charlie, but what's all this got to do with me?
You owe us a balance of $38,750.83. And you are in default.
I'm not in default. Clyde fixed it. Every 3 months, he sends you a check.
Amos, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call Clyde right now up in Detroit.
Call Clyde for what?
I think it'd be better if you got it from him. Miss Askew, give me Clyde Fussell up in Detroit, will you? Thank you. Amos, I was just explaining to Klaus here. Well, he's very interested in Fussell's land, and the history, well, you know what I mean, that story about Cato, Riley, Ku Klux Klan. Yeah.
Yellow? Clyde, is that you? Yeah? Well, then why didn't you call me?
I did. I tried. Your phone's been disconnected for 2 weeks, they say. You didn't even tell me.
Well, you such a busy man up there in Detroit. You and Axelrod with all them business deals.
There's no more business deals, Pa. Axelrod is dead. He killed himself yesterday morning.
Killed himself? Why? What happened?
$750,000 in escrow money and stocks and bonds are missing. They indicted the company accountant for forgery and embezzlement. Axelrod locks himself in the office and shoots himself.
And you, Clyde?
God only knows, Pa. As a partner, I'm legally responsible. I was a front man, you know, sales and promotion. The contracts and the paperwork, I left that to Axelrod. They impounded my car. My bank account is frozen. So naturally, the check that I sent you to cover the mortgage payment for Fussell's land bounced, Pa. It bounced. I'm sorry. I already talked to Charlie Strickland. Of course, there's nothing he can do about it.
Never mind about me. What about you, Clyde? And Francine and Xander?
She walked, Pa. She took Xander with her.
Took Xander? Took him where?
She didn't say. Pa, I can't tell you how sorry I am. Pa, Pa? Pa!
Charlie, you and the German, could you give me another week, 10 days?
Amos, you of all people, don't you know that if I could, I would?
Charlie. Charlie is my home. It's my birthright. Don't even belong to me. It belongs to Alexander, my grandson. It's all I got to leave him. Don't take it, Charlie.
Amos, it's over. It's done with. It's gone. Now, Friday, me and Klaus is going to come out there. You can show us around. Amos?
Friday.
Friday.
Two black soldiers, brothers they were, come in this country with one mule, one axe, one army rifle, one old dog, fresh from the war and hungry for the only thing that freedom ever means. Piece of land, old Mother Earth, to call their own. It was 1867 when they first got here. Other black farmers come and followed in their footsteps. And in 10 years' time, black folks owned 7,500 acres all up and down the river. But Fussel's Landing was the biggest and best of all, until one night the Ku Klux Klan rode in and set the settlement on fire. Riley run out, made his escape. But Cato, he wouldn't leave. Now, Riley didn't know that at first, and when he got outside, he looked around for Cato, but Cato wasn't there. House on fire all around him, roof caving in. But Cato just knelt down at that window, that old Army rifle picking off everything that moved. Riley, seeing the situation was hopeless, kept on calling Cato. Cato, come on, Cato, man. Let's get the hell out of here. But Cato, he wouldn't budge. Stayed there, old Cato did, cutting him down with that rifle till the roof caved in over his head. Riley tried to get back in and pull him out, but it was too late. Cato's out there now in the cemetery. Riley finally got in and pulled him out and swore a mighty oath. One mule, one axe, one Army rifle, one old dog. That's all they had. That and the land. And they took it and built it and called it Fussel's Landing.
Time is a thief who snatches things away and changes them forever. We beg of memory to give us back the treasures we think we lost by growing up and growing distant, leaving behind the nest that never follows the bird but calls her back. And even though, as Thomas Wolfe says, you can't go home again, something naive and desperately human in us all keeps trying anyway to make the long and lonesome journey one more time.
Every year, my mother used to take us to Chester, South Carolina to visit her people. And I have some of my own memories about that time. The South came to mean, you know, thick milk and bitter greens and great big old biscuits and, oh, the sweetest peaches. Flies, hot. Quilting with my grandma, hugging a bearded grandfather, you know, who smelled of tobacco and horses and sweat. It was a good smell. Back then, you know, I thought there was no such thing as ugly white people. And I thought all mean people looked like conductors. My sister says I once kicked a conductor who got our mother upset, you know, and threatened to put us off the train when she couldn't find that pass we traveled on. And I thought the boogeyman wore white sheets and all colored people were good and sang spirituals. And when something bad happened to them, they said, ah, Lord. And when they died, they got hung on trees. My sister asked sometimes, remember those horsehair mattresses we slept on and how we bury our faces in the pillows because that coarse linen, it smells so fresh. I really do remember the sound of the screen door banging and all the bustling around and all the excitement when it's time for us to leave and looking forward to this heavy lunch, you know, my grandma had packed for us to eat on the train. And I remember my big cousin Pete, he'd be clowning around. And he used to make us some pretty rings out of peach pits. I still have one that has a bead in the middle. He used to say that niggers were no good. One time, my brother showed him his medals that he won in school for running and jumping, and Pete said, I bet you stole them. I bet the only medal you ever won were for running to the table and jumping into bed. And then when we'd started off on the wagon for the train depot, he and my brother would chunk rocks at each other until somebody would tell him to stop.
South was where almost everybody we knew came from. South was where you went to visit in the summer times, and where you brought people away from, too, who were in trouble. When somebody died, you sent the body back home, down south. South was where my mother taught school. South was where colored people had a lot of land they didn't care anything about, so they just walked away from it, or they got killed, and somebody took it. South was where chickens came from, and where you could ride horses, and you could see pigs. And later, South was all those stories, you know, swamps and alligators and snakes and walking in ditches and running away, and it was Billie Holiday singing, "Southern trees bear a strange root." South was where that same big cousin Pete, you know, came home from the war and sat on the edge of a bed in his uniform and put a pistol in his mouth and blew his brains out. Hello. South was a scary place, you know. In the first place, I was a Southerner and had the map of Dixie on my tongue. I mean, not that my grammar was bad. It was the idioms. They did not know of the way an average Southern child, black or white, is raised on simile and invective. They know how to call names. I mean, it is an everyday affair to hear somebody call a mullet-headed, mule-eared, wall-eyed, hog-nosed, gator-faced, shad-mouthed, screw-necked, goat-bellied, puzzle-gutted, butt-sprung, camel-backed, battle-ham, knock-kneed, razor-legged, box-ankle, shovel-footed, unmated, so-and-so. Eyes looking like skint Jenny nuts. Mouth looked like a dishpan full of broke-up crockery. Woo. I mean, they could tell you in simile exactly how you walk and smell. And since that stratum of the Southern population is not given to book reading, they got their comparisons right out the barnyard in the woods. And when they got through with you, you and your whole family looked like an acre of totem poles.
My daddy was a railroad man. He got his start in the Blue Ridge Mountains of West Virginia. But Daddy was ambitious and smart. He knew how to keep his eyes open and his mouth shut, so it wasn't long before my daddy knew how to build a railroad. Everything from cutting right away through the heart of the swamp, digging a ditch to drain off the water, leveling the grades, setting the ties, and then laying that steel as straight and true as an arrow. Now, the great railroad lines with their great names, which have meant so much in our history, are well known and legendary. Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, New York, Central, Baltimore, and Ohio, to mention only a few. But there are, in addition to these giants, many thousands of spurs and shunts and sidings that are too short to have a name, with only 10 or 15 miles of track, or even less. Little offshoots and feeders used mostly to haul timber from the swamps. And this was the kind of track that my daddy had taught himself to build. Good job, paid well, providing a sort of working class glamour. Definitely not the kind of job for the average black man to be holding. But of course, my daddy was not the average black man. Looking at all this, thinking of him, I am reminded of the very time when I discovered that I was immortal. I was riding in the back of the wagon, and my daddy was driving along, talking to my grandfather, I think, who was sitting on the seat beside him. And I remember snuggling down deep and warm in my mother's arms and looking up and seeing my daddy's big, broad shoulders spread across the sky, and knowing in that look
knowing deep in my stomach that I would never die. And do you know, to this very day, I have not died. And that's not all my father gave me. Also, he gave me stories. And I always knew, without his having to tell me, that Brer Rabbit, High John the Conqueror, and even old John Henry were more than just the characters in the story that he was telling. I laughed, I cried, and sometimes they scared me to death. But I always knew that it was my father behind all those voices. And I could always depend on that. Daddy just naturally loved to tell stories, and me and Mom and the rest of the kids, we just naturally loved to listen. It was later, much, much later in my life, that what I think my daddy was trying to tell me finally came clear. A couple of years ago, I stood at the foot of his grave and told him so. I still remember most of what he told us. Not only what he said, but how he said it. Take this one, which happened before Dad got married. There he was, big, young, strong, healthy black man who had just been released from the chain gang and had decided to visit his favorite sister who lived in a small house near the railroad in a little Georgia town. Nobody was home, but the front door was open, as it would be in a little Georgia town before World War I. So Dad went on in and made himself at home. They had put him away for 2 years for shooting a minister, I believe. And he was so looking forward to one of his sister's home-cooked meals. But he'd gotten there just before 12 o'clock and nothing was cooking. All the pots stood empty on the stove. But when he looked into the safe, a little wooden cabinet with a screen door on it to keep out the flies, he saw a great big pound cake that had not been touched. And being hungry, he took that whole cake, plate and all, went out on the front porch, sat down in a rocking chair, started in to eat. Well, 3 or 4 good bites and half of that pound cake was gone. But Dad wasn't worried. His sister loved him. She loved to cook. And she'd be insulted if he came to her house and didn't help himself to anything she had in her kitchen. So there he sat, chewing and rocking and feeling good to be out of that prison and free at last. Then an old friend came by, looked up, saw Dad sitting rocking on that porch, and said, "Well, I'll be damned if it ain't Kent Davis." My daddy's name was Kent. "Man, your sister told me that you was on the chain gang." Dad laughed. "Yeah, I was, but I'm off now." "And how are things here in Argyle, Georgia, since I've been gone?" "White folks still on top." That was a community joke that they had laughed at many times before. And they talked to each other, bringing each other up to date while Dad just sat there a-chewing and a-rocking. His friend finally said, "Well, Kent, I got to be going. But before you leave town now, be sure and drop in to see me, you hear?" He flicked the reins on the horse's rump and started off. And then he stopped. Said, "Oh, Kent, man, I almost forgot to tell you. Your sister and her husband, they done moved." "Done moved?" Dad stopped chewing. "Yeah, white folks live in this house now." "Well, be seeing you around." And off he went. And there was my daddy, big, black, and burly, sitting on the white folks' front porch, eating pound cake. A white lady's pound cake. Daddy, starting to sweat, set the rest of the cake down, looked around to check out the lay of the land, and then slowly, so as not to excite any undue attention to his predicament, he rose from the rocking chair, wiped the crumbs off his mouth, steadied his hat on his head, went out through the front yard and closed the gate behind him and moved slowly toward the edge of town. It was all he could do to resist his natural impulse, which was to run and run like hell. But the sight of a black man running like hell through a small Georgia town with nobody chasing him was bound to arouse suspicion. So, nope, all Dad could do was to make it to the edge of town as easily and as calmly as he could. When he finally got to the bridge, he looked back, saw that nobody was following, so he thought he would sit down and catch his breath for a moment. But he couldn't sit down. His feet had decided to take over. They were moving faster and faster and faster, and almost before he knew it, he was flying along that country road, running as fast as he could, as if his very life depended on it. Running, running, oh my Lord, until finally he was so exhausted he just collapsed and sat down in the ditch. And then he started laughing. There was nobody near, black or white, nothing for miles around to be afraid of. And still that small voice had whispered in his ear, "Run, nigger, run." And he had. Every time Daddy would tell us that story, we would laugh, me the loudest of all. And now I think I know why. Here's another story that's a case in point. Now, long before Daddy ever got to be a railroad man, he worked for a while in a logging camp. His job was snaking timber out of the swamp with a team of oxen up to the railroad, where it was loaded onto flat cars and hauled away to the sawmill. Now, Daddy was a good worker. He got the job done, and he got it done on time. So Mr. Ellie Davis, the white man who owned the sawmill, took a shine to my Daddy and treated him special. When all the timber was gone and the job was finished, most of the black workers were fired, but not my Daddy. They offered him a job chipping boxes and dipping gum on a turpentine farm. Daddy said no. And Ellie Davis offered to give him more money, but my Daddy still said no. And that made Ellie Davis so mad, he went to the sheriff and said, "This uppity nigger has tricked me out of $75, and I want him arrested." It was an old trick. Ellie Davis had pulled it many times before. He knew full well that no black man would stand up in court and dispute the word of a white man. He fully expected the judge to convict Daddy and turn him back over to Ellie Davis, where he could work off this supposed $75 debt. By the way, this is one of my mama's favorite stories. She was sitting in the courtroom on the verge of tears when the judge leaned across the desk and looked down at my father and said, "Boy, you mean to tell me that after all he's tried to do for you and your people, you trick a Christian gentleman like Ellie Davis out of $75? My Daddy said, "Judge, sir, Your Honor, everybody around here knows that Mr. Ellie Davis is the smartest, sharpest businessman in this county. And, sir, if he swears in this court under oath that a poor old nigger like me, ignorant, not even knowing his own name, could trick him out of $75, well, I'm not going to be the one to dispute it." A clamor ran through the courtroom, and the black folks started to giggle. So the judge hammered with his gavel. He summoned Ellie Davis up to the bench, and they stuck their heads together for a moment. After a while, the bailiff came over to my father and said, "We're going to drop this case. But if I was you, I'd get out of this county, and I would stay out." I pick up my life, and I take it with me, and I put it down in Chicago, and Detroit, and Buffalo, Scranton, any place that is north and east, and not Dixie.
I pick up my life and take it on a train to Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Seattle, Oakland, St. Paul, any place that is up north and out west, and not south.
I'm fed up with Jim Crow laws, people who are cruel and afraid, who lynch and run, who are scared of me, and me of them.
I pick up my life, take it away. One-way ticket.
Gone up north.
On out west.
Gone. Whatever become of that old mule we used to have around the place?
We ate him.
That we did. That we did.
Booker T. Washington, sage of Tuskegee, educator, orator, author, confidant and advisor to presidents, a man of considerable importance with the white establishment, my mentor, my friend. And this is Mary Church Terrell, my wife, graduate of Oberlin College, studied overseas, social activist, fervently committed to civil rights and women's rights. These two people, both of whom mean all the world to me, are locked in mortal combat. And I, Robert Herberton Terrell, graduate of Howard University, Harvard Law, 88, magna cum laude, Justice of the Peace for the District of Columbia, Mary's husband, Booker's friend. I am caught in the middle. I am the battlefield. This latest salvo came in the afternoon mail, a letter from Booker T. When Mary reads this, I confidently predict all hell is going to break loose. Now, Mary, doggone it, she knows as well as anybody what a blasted pickle her behavior gets me into. But if you think that means any more to her now than it did 20 years ago when we first married, you don't know Mary Church Terrell.
Robert.
Curit cursum celeriter ut coronam aciperet.
Oh, you mean cursum tam celerite, don't you? He ran so fast that he might win the crown, the subjunctive of result, rather than the subjunctive of purpose.
Oh, yes, Miss Church. I always said you knew more Latin than I.
Oh, come now, Mr. Terrell. If you don't think I know you deliberately made a slip so as to have an excuse to engage me in conversation, then you must have a very poor estimate of me indeed.
On the contrary, Miss Church, my estimate of you is...
Go on.
Won't you sit down? Have you finished for today? No more unruly students to be kept after school?
I'll have you know that none of my students is unruly. They may not all be prized Latin scholars, but at least they have respect.
I'm sure you're right in both counts.
But then, being in my class instead of yours, they haven't had the benefit of the latest teaching methods from Harvard.
There you go again, Molly. When are you going to get over the fact that I went to Harvard?
When are you going to get over it?
Oh, sass as a jaybird on this fine spring day.
And why not? Oh, that I could stretch forth my arms like wings and fly. Oh, to follow the phoenix.
Phoenix? Why not the falcon, eagle, hawk?
Oh, no. Never for me any earthbound bird. High as they fly, those other birds, the phoenix soars still higher into the very province of God himself.
Phoenix? Wasn't that the mythical bird of ancient Rome or Greece or something?
Oh, no, even earlier than that, back to Africa, the early Egyptians. The phoenix was a rare and miraculous bird that appeared only in privileged ages, and it was fabled to live 500 years and then die consumed in flames. And then it would rise again at the right time in all youthful freshness from its own ashes. Robert, if I were a phoenix, would you fly away with me?
Not unless I knew exactly where you were going.
You know, sometimes I think you have no imagination at all.
Well, I confess I never had a Phoenix case in law school. But that's not the reason you came in. What's on your mind, Molly?
Robert, I've known you for all of 3 years now, so I see no need to beat about the bush.
Of course not. Say what you mean what you say.
Exactly what Susan B. Anthony was telling us just last night.
Oh. So that's it. You've been to another of your suffragette meetings, haven't you?
And what if I have?
I've told you time and time again, Molly, you're wasting time running around with that bunch of radicals. I doubt if women in this country will ever get the vote.
We certainly won't, as long as we have to deal with pig-headed men like you.
And Molly, that was insulting. That's not called for.
And I suppose what you've been saying isn't. I wish you'd have been at that meeting last night. They'd have scratched your eyes out and I'd have helped them.
Oh, my God. Don't tell me they're counseling violence.
Well, not yet, but we're considering it.
I just read in the paper today that a group is planning to march down Pennsylvania Avenue. Rank insurrection, if you ask me.
Call it that if you like, but I prefer to think we're demonstrating for law and order.
Law and order?
A law that recognizes the right of women to vote and an order to those who oppose us to cease and desist.
Don't tell me that you're going to join this march.
Join it? With Susan B. Anthony herself. I helped organize it. Oh, Robert, women from all over were gathering in less than 2 hours to begin the march. We want the world to know where we stand, and we're going to demand a constitutional amendment that acknowledges the right of women to vote and to hold public office.
Do you know what you're doing? You might wind up in jail.
So we might. And you men would then stand exposed as the tyrannical oppressors you really are.
Never mind about us men. What about you, Molly? You have your reputation to think of, let alone your job.
As long as my conscience is clear, Robert, I won't worry about my reputation. And as for my job, well, I'd hate very much to lose that.
Of course you would.
Well, not because of this pittance of a salary they pay me, but because of the children and because of some of my fellow teachers. I miss them very much.
Molly, I forbid you to take part.
You forbid? You see what I mean? Automatically you start ordering me around as if women had any less brains.
Any fewer brains.
Or as if women must go on forever playing the same old ridiculous roles you men have assigned us to since time immemorial.
No man is going to look upon you as a mature individual ready for responsibilities as long as you insist on playing the rebellious schoolgirl. No matter what your convictions, surely you must realize the necessity of being discreet.
Being discreet? About the march? About wanting to vote?
You're not cut out for this sort of thing. You're a young woman of great promise, and I simply hate to see you ruin your chances for a bright future.
No future that is worthwhile to me could possibly be ruined because I wanted to vote.
Are you sure of that?
Of course. Robert Terrell, please answer me truthfully and directly, for this is the most important question I've ever asked anyone in my life. Do you mean to say that there must be a choice between working for my convictions and having a future with you?
Mary?
I need to know now, Robert, what difference this makes. Tell me, I have a right to know. Are you asking me to choose?
No, Mary. I can't ask you that.
Thank you, Robert. I don't know what in the world I'd have done if you hadn't said that.
I do. You'd have flounced out of here with your nose in the air, and it would have taken us 2 weeks to get back together again.
Oh, Robert. I'm so lucky to have someone like you. You understand me, don't you?
Not one little bit, but I suppose I'd better get used to the idea of having a perennial radical in the family.
Did I hear you correctly, Robert? Are you proposing to me at long last?
You know, Phoenix, you're a little minx, that's what you are. I have the strangest feeling that my Latin assistant has just taken over the whole department, lock, stock, and terror. Of course, youth has a way of overcoming such differences between a man and his wife. But today, as Mary knows full well, today is a different matter. Now, not only is Booker T. Washington my friend and benefactor, he's also the most powerful colored man in America. From presidents and legislators to captains of industry and educators, when it comes to matters of race, the one man they always consult is Booker T. Washington. Of course, there are those who say that Booker only tells them what they want to hear, thereby holding back the progress of the race. One of his arch enemies, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, has even gone so far as to organize a movement to counter Booker's influence. Under the circumstances, Booker naturally expects the full support and absolute loyalty of all his friends, a fact he made unequivocally clear one night some time ago when he came to dinner bearing good news.
I should have called yesterday. A toast. A toast to Justice Robert Herberton Terrell, soon to be the first colored judge of the Municipal Court of the District of Columbia. And, of course, to Mary, his beloved wife. An excellent port, but must I drink alone?
No, of course not. It's just that I...
Overwhelmed, I'll bet, huh? I have just come from a meeting with the president. He asked for my recommendations. I gave him Robert.
I thank you. Ever since I've known you, you've been an ardent supporter and champion of my career. My only wish is that I might, in some small way, prove worthy of the many honors you have made possible. I drink to Booker T. Washington, the sage of Tuskegee.
Stop it now, Robert. I will not allow you to underestimate yourself like this. You are a most worthy candidate for the municipal court. And tell the president, Mr. Washington, that I congratulate him on the excellence and the wisdom of his choice.
How right you are. And this need not be the limit of your horizons, Bob. I'm always happy to advance the careers of bright, able, intelligent, determined, and loyal young men like yourself.
I am flattered.
Needless to say, I have my enemies. Those who don't or won't understand my approach in attempting to minister to our downtrodden race. They are malicious, vindictive, and envious. But I try to bear these crosses as best I can and go on with my work.
Forgive me, Mr. Washington, but...
Booker to my friends, please.
All right, Booker. I'm sure you are aware that there are those that are sincere in exploring avenues other than those that you have chosen on behalf of our people.
Such as?
Such as Ida Wells Barnett, Monroe Trotter, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois.
Do you really think this is the time, Mary, to go into all that? Booker's just brought us good news.
No better time, Bob. Please go on.
I don't wish to seem unappreciative or rude. You are our guest and most welcome. Still, I believe there is merit in considering the views of Du Bois and the others, as well as your own, because I believe that in some things, each of you may be right.
And in some other things?
And in other things, each of you may be wrong.
You know, that reminds me of the story about these two old sharecroppers. When I told the president this one, he almost fell out of his chair. Well, anyway, these two old jokers were coming home from the field. It was about dusk dark, and they saw this Confederate flag lying in a ditch near a cemetery. Well, you know how darkies are about haints and such, and they...
Molly.
You gentlemen will have to excuse me.
Booker, it's probably a headache. You know, she's been rather busy of late. You know how it is.
Oh, it's all right, Bob. Some people just don't like my kind of humor, and I guess Mrs. Terrell is one of them. The president has given me his word. He agrees that there should be a colored judge in the district municipal court. Now, of course, there'll be a hearing, and you'll have to be confirmed. I'm not worried about you, but there could be a question about Mary, a hard question.
About Mary?
Yes, there's that speech she gave at the Women's Rights Convention in Berlin some years ago. Mind you, in perfect, flawless German. Quite an accomplishment it was, but it was a bit on the inflammatory side. And, but I reassured the president that even if the speech should come up in the hearing committee, you could handle it, right?
Right, sure.
Good, man, good. You just can't afford to bite the hand that you're asking to feed you. Du boys in this crowd don't understand that. If they only knew what I had to go through to come this far. Now, you can't get Mary to understand that, can't you?
Yes, at least I'll try.
Good, man, good. Oh, did I tell you the one about old Rastus down in Alabama who woke up one morning with what he thought was the chicken pox?
In all the excitement that followed, I guess I didn't pay as much attention to Mary and to what she was doing as perhaps I should have. But Mary knew what this appointment meant to me, what it meant to all of us. My name, with Booker T. Washington's recommendation, was in front of the President of the United States for elevation to the municipal court. If nominated and then confirmed, it would be the first time a man of color had ever occupied such a high position. Precedent-shattering. But now, with all this, what on earth is Mary thinking? How does she expect her husband to advance in his career when all the time she insists upon...
Oh, there you are. Oh, Robert, I wish you had been at that meeting. They asked me to speak, and I declined. But then they insisted, so I had to offer a few remarks, as they say. Well, when it was all over, they nearly mobbed the podium. I barely got out of there with my clothes intact.
Mary.
I tell you, Robert.
Mary.
Well, what's the matter? Why are you shouting?
Would you sit down, Mary? I'd like to talk to you.
Well, all right, but I haven't got much time because there's the dinner to see after, and then there's that meeting tonight at the university. I hope you haven't forgotten. Oh, what's this all about?
This.
Oh, from Booker T. What is the sage of Tuskegee got to say this time?
Read it for yourself.
I suppose you have seen the printed program of the meeting to be held in New York sometime in May, under the auspices of the opposition crowd. He means the new group, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
What else?
Not a few of your friends here are nonplussed as to why Mrs. Terrell's name appears among the members of the executive committee and as one of the speakers on the program. This kind of thing is really embarrassing. Why should he be embarrassed? Dr. Du Bois wrote him a personal invitation to attend the founding meeting of the organization, and he absolutely declined.
I know. But read on.
I think it but just to your friends to let us know where you are at. Just look at that, a dangling participle. Well, of course, I'm not seeking to control anybody's actions. Oh, no. But you can easily see that for your friends to be called upon to go to the White House or to see the Attorney General in your behalf one day, and the next a tirade appears abusing the president at a meeting where Mrs. Terrell is a member of the executive committee and one of the principal speakers, becomes really embarrassing for us. Yes, truly. Well, if this isn't the limit.
Call it what you like, but that's what he says.
The absolute nerve of the man. It's nothing short of an outright threat. Get your wife out of the NAACP, or I'll tell the president not to reappoint you to the federal bench.
That's about the size of it, Molly.
Robert, I have tried and tried with that man, but I am about at the end of my patience. Well, this is positively insulting.
Insulting or not, there it is.
What can he be thinking of? You know, I quite well understand the depth of his animosity toward Dr. Du Bois. But the NAACP is not about Du Bois or anybody else. It's about lynching and discrimination, and what are we going to do about it? And for him to make threats against you, who so often defended him, well, this is just too much.
Maybe Booker is slow and not as direct as Du Bois and the others, but these things take time.
It's been 15 years since he made that Atlanta Compromise speech. As separate as the fingers, but one as the hand. Separate but equal, right? Huh. With all the emphasis on the separate, and no consideration at all for the equal. Surely he must know that his is not the only road to racial salvation.
Be that as it may, Booker's been a good friend. Now, you know he's gone to bat for me. And you know what's at stake here.
I certainly do. Our independence.
He sees it as a conflict of interest.
I see it as a conflict of principle.
Look, the point is quite simply, if Booker withdraws his endorsement, President Taft may very well withdraw my nomination.
Well, I, for one, refuse to believe that Judge Terrell owes his grits and fatback to Booker T. Washington alone.
Grits and fatback, I beg you.
Each time you won the seat for Senate confirmation, it's been the good citizens of Washington, D.C., colored and white, who've supported you.
But you've got to get appointed first.
Well, what do you suggest I do? Resign?
No, Mary, nothing as drastic as all that.
Then what? Tell me what it is you want me to do.
It's quite simple. I want you to stay away from that meeting next month in New York. Give an excuse. Say that you have a prior commitment, a schedule conflict, anything. But wait a while. Give this thing time to simmer down.
But there's important work to be done at that meeting. Questions of strategy, organization, funding.
Write a letter. Send some money, but stay away.
Robert, I'm one of the founders. My presence is needed.
I need you too. Now think back, Mary. Think back all the times I supported you and adjusted to your needs in one way or the other. Now, all I'm asking is that you adjust a little to my needs. That you finally accept your place beside me. That we stand together in accord as husband and wife.
And if I don't? If I feel that I can't?
I'm asking very little of you, Mary.
Oh, no, Robert. I see it as a great deal. You're asking me to give up my work.
Not give up. Just postpone.
And where will it end? If I postpone this time, when will be the next time? It's not compromise you're asking. It's surrender. Well, Robert, if you want me to stay away from that meeting next week, I'll do it.
Thank you, Mary.
But you'll have to order me.
Hmm?
As is your legal right as a husband.
No.
Just as the slave master could order his chattel slave, so a man can order his wife. It's the law. You have the right.
Now, see here, that's not fair.
It's up to you. It's your decision. As my legal lord and master. Do I go or do I stay? Robert, are you all right?
No, damn it, I'm not all right. I'm mad as hell.
Mad? Angry, you mean?
That too, but mad as a hatter to think that I had a snowball's chance in hell of ever getting to do anything that I've ever asked you to do.
But I've just said...
What you just said is a stacked deck. It's like that woman in ancient Greece, whatever the hell her name was. She got all the wives not to sleep with their husbands because they wouldn't stop fighting wars.
That was Lysistrata. I haven't gone quite that far.
You might as well have. Well, when it comes to having to choose between Booker T. Washington and thou, beside me singing in the wilderness. Go on to your meeting, Mary, with, for what it's worth, my blessings. I'll find some way to placate old Booker.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. You understand. You understand, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Robert, please. Let me go. I've got to see about dinner.
Mm-mm. No more of your grits and fatback. I'm taking you out to dine tonight and afterwards.
Well, remember the reception tonight at the university.
Judge and Mrs. Terrell tender their heartfelt regrets. Our reception is just going to be for the two of us, you and me. And it's going to be right upstairs.
Oh, Judge Terrell. Well, if we're really going out to dine, I better get dressed.
Now make it snappy, else we'll get right to the reception and skip the dinner. In spite of dire predictions, I got that appointment. And Mary went on to her convention. She was always a fighter and lived to see the passage of a constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote. Mary Church Terrell.